The drizzle fell fine and steady like the sky was weeping slowly. The windshield wiper barely kept up. The road, narrow and deserted, wound through hills covered in bare trees. Daniela gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. She shouldn't be here. The main highway had been blocked by an accident, and the GPS kept rerouting her through this alternate path, a forgotten little road between two towns. In a country she barely knew, she was traveling alone, driving to a job interview across the border. It was already past 9 at night. That's when she saw the sign, Hôtel Vieux Chêne. It was a splintered wooden sign covered in moss, hanging crookedly by a rusted chain. The image next to the words was of a twisted old oak tree. Daniela hesitated. The fuel gauge hovered near empty, and there was no cell signal. Reluctantly, she turned left onto a narrow gravel entrance. The hotel emerged like a whisper from the past. Grand, old, and wrong. It was a dark stone building with tall windows, many of them boarded up, and a porch that creaked in the wind. A single lantern flickered at the entrance, casting shadows that seemed to shift on their own. At the front desk, a thin, hunched man appeared from behind the counter. He wore an outdated vest, and his deep-set eyes never blinked. "Good evening, madam. We have only one room available, room 212. The number echoed in Daniela's mind like a funeral bell. She swallowed hard. "That's fine," she replied, trying to sound natural. She signed a thick hardcover guest book, where the names looked decades old. The man handed her a heavy iron key, the number roughly engraved on it. He didn't smile, just gave a slow nod, like someone mourning something unspoken. The hallway on the second floor felt darker than it should have. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, and the cold in the air wasn't just from winter. Room 212 was the last one at the end of the hallway. As she turned the key and opened the door, Daniela was hit by a strange smell, a mix of mold, damp wood, and something sweet, cloying like incense burned long ago. The room was simple but heavy. The curtains were thick and old. The double bed looked unused, but there was an armchair in the corner with its floral fabric torn at the edges. An oval mirror hung crookedly on the wall. Daniela dropped her backpack and headed to the bathroom. The faucet hissed before spitting out brown water. She splashed her face and looked up. In the mirror, she could have sworn she saw something move. A dark silhouette, just behind her. But when she turned around, she was alone. The silence felt thick, the kind that listens back. Later that night, lying in bed unable to sleep, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging, and then she remembered what the receptionist had said. "We have only one room available." What if she wasn't alone after all? Daniela woke with a start, or maybe she had never really slept. It felt like she had been submerged in a continuous nightmare, but there was no way to tell what had been dream and what had truly happened. The first thing she noticed was that the curtains had been opened. She clearly remembered closing them before going to bed. Now the gray morning light filtered through the torn fabric, and a damp chill clung to the room. She got up slowly, her body heavy, as if something had held her down all night. She ran her hands over her arms. They were marked. Small parallel red scratches like invisible fingernails had touched her. The armchair was turned around. She was sure she'd left it facing the bed. The mirror was fogged, but she hadn't used the bathroom since the night before. There was a phrase written in the condensation, as if someone had drawn it with a finger from the other side. "He never left." Daniela stepped back. The words slowly faded as if they'd never existed. She grabbed her things without looking back, left the room as quickly as she could, and went downstairs. The receptionist was no longer there. The key sat on the counter. Outside, the sky was still overcast, and the breeze carried the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. The hotel looked even older in daylight, like a carcass forgotten by time. She drove for about 10 minutes until she found a small roadside building. San Clemente Bakery since 1951. An old iron sign and a brick facade painted white. Inside, the warmth was welcoming, the air filled with the smell of strong coffee and fresh bread. Daniela sat at the counter and ordered a café au lait and a slice of pie. "Miss, are you coming from the Vieux Chêne?" The voice was soft but firm, coming from her side. It was an old woman with white hair tied in a bun, sitting silently until then, a cup in her hand. Her eyes were light and deep, as if they could see beyond. Daniela hesitated, then nodded. Just stayed the night. It was the only place around. The old woman made a sound between a short laugh and a sigh. No one should sleep there anymore. Not after what happened. Daniela frowned. What happened?" The woman looked at her for a few seconds as if deciding whether to tell or not. Last century, a very traditional family owned that hotel. They lived there and on the top floor. The youngest son, something happened to him. He started speaking in tongues no one understood, stopped eating, said someone was living inside his body, screamed every night. Her voice lowered slightly. They tried doctors, priests. Nothing worked. Until they brought in an exorcist from far away. A Frenchman, they say. The ritual took place in room 212, but it was never completed. Daniela felt a chill up her spine. Why not? Because the exorcist died before it was finished. During the ritual, they say it was the demon itself that killed him. The child survived, but after that day, no one ever saw him again. They sealed the room for years, but from time to time it becomes the only one available again. The woman took a sip of her coffee and added, almost in a whisper, "He likes it when someone new enters, especially women. He waits, watches, and tries to get out." Daniela sat frozen, cup in hand, eyes locked on the woman. I saw something written on the mirror. He never left. The woman nodded slowly. Because he hasn't, and now, maybe he's with you. The sky hung low and oppressive, the clouds tinged with a sickly green hue that often comes before a storm. Daniela got into her car, her heart still racing from what the old woman had told her. She wanted to leave, to keep driving, to put miles between herself and that cursed hotel. But when she tried to take the main road, she found a line of stopped cars and a makeshift barrier of orange cones and signs. A local police officer, wearing a yellow raincoat and holding a radio, approached her window. "You'll have to turn back, ma'am. Big landslide up ahead. The road's covered in mud and fallen trees. Might be 2 days before it's cleared if we're lucky." 2 days? She repeated, her throat tightening. There are some inns in the small town just before the detour, but they're all full. A few folks ended up staying at that old hotel by the fork. Daniela felt the blood drain from her face. "The Vieux Chêne?" "Yeah, that old stone house. Weird, right? Place is always empty, but today, seems like everyone decided to stop there." She turned back. The hotel looked different in the muted afternoon light. There were no new cars in the lot, yet inside, she saw other suitcases stacked in the lobby. A group of 3 people stood near the reception, whispering nervously. One man in a brown suit looked pale as if he hadn't slept at all. The receptionist, however, appeared exactly the same, motionless, expressionless, as though time didn't move inside those walls. "Ah, madame. I'm glad you returned. Your room is still reserved. Room 212 is patient." Daniela tried to smile, but the word struck her like a cold slap. Patient, as if the room had been waiting. She walked upstairs slowly. Each step groaned in protest beneath her weight. At the door to room 212, she stopped. Something was off. The number on the door, it was now slightly crooked, as if pushed from the inside. She turned the key and slowly opened the door. The room was cold, much colder than before, and everything seemed slightly out of place, as if someone had come in and moved things just enough to make her doubt her memory. The armchair now faced the mirror, and on the bed lay a single black feather. Daniela had no idea where it could have come from. There were no feather pillows, no cushions like that. She picked it up between two fingers and tossed it in the trash, trying to ignore the chill crawling up her neck. On the first night, it was the sound, knocking behind the walls as if something were trying to get out, not rhythmic, alive. Then came scratching noises from beneath the bed. When she turned on the lights, nothing. Daniela woke to someone calling her. Whispers that came from the mirror, from the armchair, from the ceiling. Voices that mimicked hers, that spoke in disjointed phrases. "You let him in. He doesn't need permission. He's already where you are." On the second night, it was the voice. And once she heard her own name, not like someone calling her, but like someone introducing themselves. From the other side of the mirror. Daniela. On the third night, Daniela didn't sleep. She tried. She lay down, turned to her side, pressed a pillow over her ears. But the room was awake. The wood creaked like shifting bones. The armchair groaned, as if someone were rocking in it, as if it were waiting. At around 2:43 a.m., the bedside lamp flickered and went out. When Daniela got up to try and turn it back on, something in the air shifted, a vibration, like a low-frequency humming that passed straight through her chest. The room grew even darker. A shadow slid down the walls. Daniela ran for the door, but the handle spun uselessly in her hand. Locked from the outside. The mirror began to fog up, though the room was ice cold. And this time what appeared wasn't a sentence. It was a single word. Restart. Daniela stumbled backward. The floor seemed to move away from her feet. A buzzing sound filled her ears and the air thickened like smoke. And then, she wasn't there anymore. The room remained the same, but everything in it was different. The curtains were torn, covered in symbols scrawled in Latin. Black candles burned in each corner. The armchair sat empty now, but the fabric bore deep claw marks. And the bed was occupied. A child. A boy, maybe 10 years old, strapped by wrists and ankles with cracked leather belts. His eyes were open, pitch black without irises. Endless. Men stood around him. A priest in a dark stole gripping a crucifix, sweat dripping down his face. Two others held the boy down as he writhed. The walls shook with screams that didn't sound remotely human. Daniela tried to scream. No one saw her. She was there, but not herself. She was a point of consciousness, a witness, and somehow also part of it. You who dwell in darkness, reveal your name. The priest shouted, voice cracking with fear. The boy smiled, not with his mouth, with his hollow, endless eyes. You let him in, the voice said, not from the boy, but from the walls, from the floor, from inside Daniela's head. And now, he needs a new body. At that moment, Daniela saw her reflection in the room's mirror. And it wasn't her. It was the boy. She was in him. She felt the belts tightening on her wrists, felt the thing inside her slithering through her veins, something ravenous, and she wanted to scream, but her mouth only whispered, "Help me." The priest stepped forward with the crucifix, but before it could touch the child's forehead, an invisible wind slammed through the room. The candles blew out. The priest was hurled against the wall, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Screams, blood. Daniela, still trapped in the boy's body, felt it all: pain, hatred, panic, and then silence. Darkness devoured everything. She woke on the wooden floor of room 212, gasping, her face soaked in sweat. It was still the middle of the night. The candles were gone. The bed was empty. The mirror untouched, but she could still smell sulfur. And in the corner of the room, in the armchair, someone was sitting. She couldn't see the face, only the eyes, black as the boy's, and a voice whispered right beside her ear, though no one was there, "Now you know what it feels like. Now you are the door." Daniela had no idea how much time had passed since the vision, or the possession, or whatever that thing had been. She could barely remember how she'd gotten back to bed. Now, sitting in the dark, her body was cold, but something inside burned, like a heat crawling beneath her skin, like she was slowly being filled from the inside out. In the mirror, from time to time, her reflection smiled, even when she didn't. Meanwhile, in the small village a few kilometers away, Mrs. Amalia, the woman from the bakery, closed the shop window curtain, her hands trembling around a coffee cup. She had told the story. She knew she shouldn't have, but she had. And now, she could feel it beginning again. Without hesitation, she called an old number, one scribbled on a slip of paper she kept tucked between the pages of an old book, along with a black ribbon. "It's her, the girl from the hotel. Room 212 is active again." On the other end, the voice took a moment to reply. "I knew it would happen eventually. Did she see the signs? She saw too much." Hours later, when the clock at the Vieux Chêne reception desk struck 3:03 a.m., a black car pulled up in front of the entrance. A tall man stepped out wearing a dark overcoat. In his hands, he carried a worn leather case. His eyes were sunken with exhaustion, a thin scar crossing his left eyebrow. His name was Father Lucien Dubois, grandson of the French exorcist who had died right there, in room 212. He was no parish priest. He had never held a mass, but he had been trained since childhood for one task only: to finish what his grandfather had started. He crossed the lobby without a word from the receptionist, as if everyone already knew why he had come. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step burdened with the weight of the past. Inside the room, Daniela stood before the mirror. She was crying, but she didn't blink. Her eyes were darkening at the edges, as though the shadow was blooming from within. When Lucien entered, she turned slowly. "You're too late," she said in a voice that was and wasn't hers. Lucien placed the case on the floor, knelt down, and took out a small crucifix, a silver vial, and an old leather-bound book, its pages stained with time. "He never left because you left the work unfinished," he said. "But today, I end it." Daniela stepped forward. The skin on her face seemed to pull tight from within. Her eyes darkened further with every passing second. Lucien began the rite. "I exorcise you, unclean spirit. In the name of God the Father, I command you, depart from this servant." The room's temperature dropped violently. Blood began to seep down the walls like sweat from a living house. Daniela screamed. Her voice split into two, then three. A low guttural laugh echoed from the ceiling. "You're as weak as he was. You'll die like he did." Lucian pressed the crucifix to the floor and pulled a hidden page from inside the book. A passage his grandfather had never dared use. A ritual of forced expulsion, one that not only drove the entity out but sealed it in the space between worlds. He began to recite, and as he did, the floor shook. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. The bed lifted off the ground. Daniela floated for a moment, her face twisted in agony and terror. At the final moment, Lucian shouted the last word of the rite. "Clausum est!" A black light erupted from Daniela's mouth like living smoke. It screamed, twisted, clawed at the air, trying to reach Lucien. But he stood firm, eyes closed, arms outstretched. The smoke was pulled into the crucifix, which burned red hot in his hands before turning to ash. Daniela collapsed to the floor unconscious. Lucian dropped to his knees. Blood trickled from his ears. And worse got when he tried to open his eyes. The world was silent. He had lost his hearing. Forever. Months later, Daniela was back in her hometown. She had rebuilt her life as best she could. She still had nightmares sometimes, always with the mirror. With eyes that weren't hers, but she kept going. One day she received a letter. No return address. Inside the envelope, just a single page written in old-fashioned handwriting. The door was closed, but the walls still breathe. The room doesn't need guests. It chooses, and one day it will call again. Beneath the sentence, a number scrawled in black ink, 212. Daniela burned the letter, but deep down, she knew it was only the beginning. Archive of the Diocese of Saint-Rouge, Inland, France, 1932. Partial report on the Vieux Chêne case, sealing of room 212. Following the events involving 10-year-old Mathieu Chevalier and the accidental death of Father Henri Dubois during the exorcism at the Vieux Chêne Hotel, the immediate sealing of the room is ordered. Any ritual or attempt to reopen the space is strictly forbidden without canonical authorization. The spirit identified on site does not match manifestations documented in common possessions. Its behavior suggests independent consciousness and its own agenda. Signed, Monseigneur Jean Lemaitre, Archivist of the Order of Forgotten Rites, 1932.